Okay, so we're going to start out by orienting ourselves in the sky. There's a star called Polaris. It is also known as the North Star. And it is so named because if you are looking at this star, you are looking directly in the north direction. Polaris sits directly above the Earth's geographic North Pole. So if you imagine this person right here standing on the North Pole, right there, and looking straight up, Polaris would be directly above her. This location, that point directly above you, is called the zenith. So if you look up and you see Polaris at your zenith, you know that you are standing on the North Pole. A really cool thing about this is that Polaris does not appear to move through our night sky. So if you locate Polaris, you are locating the north direction. Now, all other stars appear to rotate around Polaris, and some of them make a complete circle and never set below the horizon. These are called circumpolar stars. The higher you are in latitude, or the closer you are to the North Pole, the more stars are circumpolar. So in this picture here, you can see all of these circles. This is a time-lapse picture. So this is somebody, David Malin, apparently, pointed his camera at Polaris and left the shutter open. Okay, so this is a long exposure picture. So this right here is the movement of one star. So each one of these little lines is the movement of one star over that period of time. So this right here is Polaris. Notice there's this dot. That's the star that doesn't move. So this is Polaris. So even over time, it stays in the same place. So all of these stars circling around that make a complete circle and don't set are called circumpolar. Now, if you're standing at the equator, when you look for Polaris, you might not be able to see it because Polaris is going to be right on the horizon. So the stars that are moving around it, they all set. So this is kind of interesting because at the equator, none of the stars are circumpolar. So here's one that is a little bit not quite at the equator, maybe, oh, I don't know, maybe 10 degrees north. So maybe Hawaii. So if you were in Hawaii and you were taking this picture, Polaris would be really close to the horizon. You might not be able to see it very well because we're very low in latitude. So Polaris is going to be low in the sky. You can see these stars, very few of them are going to be circumpolar, but you have a whole bunch that are circling around. This one is a little bit higher in latitude. I'm not sure where this one was taken. Maybe about 20 degrees latitude. This one was taken at about 40 degrees latitude. So this is the sky that we would see here in Council Grove. Polaris is pretty high up in the sky. Remember, if you extend your hand out and extend your pinky and your thumb, that's 20 degrees. So 2 hand widths up is going to be about 40 degrees. And that's where you're going to look to see Polaris. And I just kind of like these pictures. They're really pretty. So these are circumpolar pictures. These are called star trails. And they're just a really fun thing. If you really want to get into astrophotography, this is a fun thing and fairly easy thing to do. Go set your camera out and open up the shutter and set the timer, or set the shutter timer, not the timer to take a snapshot picture, but keep it open for more than a few seconds and you can get a pretty neat star trail. So to find Polaris, it is a little bit tricky. Polaris is not the brightest star in the sky. It's actually really not that bright at all. That can make it kind of hard to find. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with something that is fairly easy to find. The Big Dipper is a group of stars that most of us have noticed at one point or another. The 7 stars form a very prominent shape of a cup with a handle. Now keep in mind, most pictures will show us the horizontal, but in the sky, it might be tilted at an angle. Okay, so remember that these stars are moving around in the sky. So here is the Big Dipper upside down. Here is the Big Dipper at an angle. Here's the Big Dipper at another angle. So when you go out and look for the Big Dipper, keep in mind, you might not see it just like a flat thing that we typically see in our pictures. So here's kind of an up-close picture of the Big Dipper. These stars are actually named. These are called the ancient names. So Dubhe and Merak, Megrez, all of these stars have ancient names to them. Okay, so you can actually, if you are really interested in that, you can go out and say, hey, look, I found Alcor. Now, one thing also, if you look very closely, if you look at this picture, this is an actual picture of the constellation. If you look very closely right here, you can see two very bright stars together. These are two stars that are actually orbiting around each other, and it's known as a binary star system. So when you go out and you look at this top part of the handle of the Big Dipper, you're looking at a binary star system, which is just kind of cool. If you have a pair of binoculars, get your binoculars out, you can see it very easily. Sometimes you can see it with the naked eye, but it is much, much more beautiful if you have the binoculars. So you can zoom in and see those. Now, what's kind of interesting, the Big Dipper itself is not a constellation. It's what's called an asterism. An asterism is just a prominent set of stars like the Big Dipper, but it's actually part of a larger constellation. So you can see here, here's the Big Dipper, and then you can see some other stars that are kind of drawn in there. This is actually Ursa Major. Ursa Major means the Big Bear, and that is just, that's the actual constellation, is the Big Bear, and the Big Dipper is a part of that. Something to keep in mind is that if you were to look up a picture of what the Big Bear should look like, you get a lot of different versions. Okay, so keep in mind that these are things that people have made stories of in the sky. So this constellation has a story associated with it. And everybody has their own picture of what that bear looks like. So when you Google the Big Bear and you look for Ursa Major, you will see different lines of constellations, but also different pictures. So just kind of keep that in mind. Another really interesting thing to think about is that the Big Dipper stars, when you look at them in the sky, they all kind of look like they are just like painted onto the sky. They all look like they are the same distance away. In reality, they're really not. If you were to look at it from the side, what you see is that these stars are all different distances from Earth. So Merak is 78 light years away. That is 90 light years away. Alkaid is 210 light years away from Earth. I think the star is so far away. So what you're seeing is perspective, right? So as we look at our position in space, these stars appear to line up in the sky to form a picture in our mind. But keep in mind that they're not all the same distance away. All right, now find your Polaris star map. If you don't have this, you can sketch this onto another piece of paper, but it is linked in Classroom, so if you need to print this off, you can definitely do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the outline for Ursa Major. So where do you think Ursa Major is on this paper? If you kind of look, you can see the Big Dipper right here, right? It's really prominent. It's something that really kind of sticks out. The stars on the Big Dipper are pretty bright, and they form a very distinct shape in the sky. So there's the Big Dipper. So around that, we're going to fill in Ursa Major. Even cooler is we are going to use this to locate some other stars and constellations in the sky. So look at these two stars here on the end of the Big Dipper. If you were to draw a line through those two stars and keep on drawing, right? Take these two stars, form a line, and just keep drawing, you would run into Polaris. This is called a pointer system, or pointer stars. Okay, so we take these two stars, line them up, and draw a straight line from there. And that points to Polaris. So that is the easiest way to find Polaris in the sky. Polaris is the handle of what a lot of people call the Little Dipper. So we have a Big Dipper here, and we have a Little Dipper here. Right? These kind of rotate around each other in the sky. So if you get a chance, go out a few hours space in between them and kind of see how they move around each other. It's kind of neat to watch. Now the Little Dipper is not actually the name of this constellation. The actual name of this constellation is Ursa Minor. Okay? So if Ursa Major was the Big Bear, then Ursa Minor is the Little Bear. And Polaris is the tail of the Little Bear. This is actually a constellation that's kind of difficult to see. These stars are not very bright. Once you see it, you can kind of see it. But these stars here, especially here in the middle, are pretty dim, and they can be difficult to see. But that's your first pointer system. These two stars here on the end of the Big Dipper point straight up to Polaris. Now another system uses the bottom star in the cup and draws a line through Polaris. So once you locate Polaris and you know the Big Dipper, you can take this corner star, point through Polaris, and you're going to run into a really bright star called Calf. Calf looks like it's on the tail end of a squashed W, and this is the constellation Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is actually a queen in Greek mythology. Not a very nice queen. If you really want to get into Greek mythology and read up on these constellations, a lot of these constellations are built around that type of mythology. And so it's kind of fascinating to go back and read the stories. Cassiopeia was not a very nice lady. She was a very vain queen. And there's a whole story about her and Andromeda and Perseus and Hercules. That's kind of disturbing. If you're really into that, go look it up. Another system in the Big Dipper is the arc to Arcturus. So if you take and draw a curve down from the handle of the Big Dipper, right? So this kind of appears to curve. If you curve down, you are arcing to Arcturus. It's a very bright star in the constellation of Bootes. Bootes is a shepherd in the sky, so he's keeping care of all the sheep. I guess maybe keeping them away from the bears, I'm not sure. Then once you arc to Arcturus, you can spike to Spica. All right, so arc to Arcturus and spike to Spica. Spica is the brightest star in the constellation Virgo. Okay, so now imagine a hole in the bottom of the Big Dipper and the water's dripping out. The water will dip, the water will drip straight down onto the head of Leo the Lion. This constellation is made up of a fairly prominent question mark. This is one that's kind of hard to see in the early evening, in the spring and the winter, but especially in the summer, he's up. If you are early morning in the spring, you should be able to see him pretty easily. Regulus is the brightest star in Leo. And then we can also go one more. There's up on the left side of the cup. Use those two stars as pointers. Go through Polaris, and you will run into Deneb. Deneb is the brightest star in the constellation Cygnus, and Cygnus means swan. So there you have it. This is a quick summary of a few of the constellations that you can see when you look towards the north. This gives you a place to start. Go out on a clear night and see which ones you can see.